Good day. I'm your library director, Veronica, and I'd like to welcome you to the world of cryptozoology. According to Merriam-Webster, cryptozoology is the study of and search for animals, especially legendary animals such as Sasquatch, usually in order to evaluate the possibility of their existence. As you can see from this map, legendary animals and mythological monsters are rumored to exist all over the world. The study of cryptozoology brings up a lot of questions, largely because many relegate it to the realms of pseudoscience, or systems of theories, assumptions, and methods erroneously or incorrectly regarded as scientific. However, if science proves anything, it's that there's much of the world humans don't know about. Given this sentiment, who's to say that there really are no such things as the mythical creatures from fairy tales, legends, and myths roaming around the more ignored corners of the earth? Therefore, we will be discussing what exactly makes an animal a cryptid, types of cryptids, winged cryptids, and cryptids who dwell largely either on land or in the water. Significant attention will be paid to aquatic cryptids, since the Summer Quest theme is oceans of possibilities. But as a bonus, we'll also look at the top 10 cryptids of Pennsylvania. So what exactly are cryptids? Simply put, they're animals that have been claimed to exist, but lack significant proof of that existence. There may be plenty of anecdotes, the occasional blurry photograph, or even unexplainable video footage, but there is nothing reliably documented, nothing direct, nothing clear, nothing born from either observation or experimentation, and certainly nothing repeatable. In short, there is no scientific evidence of these animals in existence today. But just because we haven't been able to observe, experiment, or repeat any findings on cryptids doesn't mean they don't exist. Science discovers new strains of bacteria daily through methods that people 100 years ago wouldn't even be able to comprehend. I find those methods impressive myself. They're crazy and advanced, and we've learned way more about the depths of the ocean and its inhabitants than we ever thought imaginable. Perhaps we simply haven't found the proper places, advanced equipment, or correct methods to observe these elusive creatures known as cryptids. Cryptids can be categorized in a large variety of ways, as can all animals on the planet. However, cryptids don't exactly fit into our handy animal taxonomy: species, genus, family, etc. Today we're going to look at three main groups. One determined by a particular physical characteristic, winged cryptids, and the other two determined by where the creatures spend the majority of their time dwelling, either in the water, aquatic cryptids, or on land, terrestrial cryptids. Not to be confused with extraterrestrials, who incidentally may be categorized as terrestrial cryptids. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you grew up here in the area or closer to Philly, and you hear the term winged cryptid, your first thought is probably of the Jersey Devil. This creature, sometimes known as the Leeds Devil, is said to inhabit the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. Described as a flying biped with hooves, there are many variations. Most common among them is that of a kangaroo-like creature with the face of a horse, the head of a dog, bat-like wings, horns, and a tail. For over 250 years, this mysterious creature is said to prowl through the marshes of southern New Jersey and emerge periodically to rampage through the towns and cities. Designated in 1938 as the country's only state demon, the most widely held belief about the origin of the Jersey Devil is that Mrs. Leeds, a resident of Estellville, was distraught when she learned she was expecting for the 13th time. Unlucky 13. In disgust, she cried out, "Let it be the devil!" It is said that when the child arrived, it was a baby devil. The creature then gave a screech, unfolded its wings, and flew out the window into the adjacent swamp. Countless stories have circulated describing the devil's escapades, raiding chicken coops and farms, destroying crops, and killing animals. His presence has been seen and felt by many in at least 50 different towns when he emerges from his natural lair in the Pinelands and wanders throughout southern New Jersey, sometimes intriguing and sometimes terrorizing the residents. Posses were constantly formed to apprehend the devil, but to no avail. At one point, as much as $100,000 was offered for the capture of the Jersey Devil, dead or alive. Several reports of the devil's death also proved to be inconclusive, and even the scientific community could not explain its existence. Belief in the Jersey Devil is quite real and based on records of concrete occurrences. Reliable people, including police, government officials, businessmen, and many others whose integrity is beyond question, have witnessed the devil's activities. To this day, people traveling down the Garden State Parkway or the Atlantic City Expressway report sightings of something or tell stories of strange occurrences. Many continue to believe that the legendary being is still around, disturbing the region, and will continue to do so for generations to come. But the Jersey Devil is only one winged cryptid. There are many others, though I admit that I had to dig a bit to find them. The most interesting thing is that winged cryptids have wings of all varieties: butterfly-like, insect-like, bird-like, and bat-like, though by far, bat-like wings seem to appear to be most common in sightings and descriptions, possibly because many cryptids people enjoy discussing are of the creepy or spooky variety. However, just because a cryptid has wings doesn't mean it can fly. Take the Brazilian Ramsawamnari, for example. According to myth, they are forest and cave demons that resemble large, flightless birds with flabby bodies, bat wings, and scissor-like beaks. They emit an eerie whistle and can shapeshift, preying on the souls of both the living and the dead. Some of the other winged cryptids I have come across in my research include, from left to right, in the two pictures on the far left of the screen, you will see the Namibian flying snake, which is an odd gargantuan serpent that is possibly derived from African legends of dragons. Found in the Karas region in Namibia, Africa, this serpent is said to have been seen in 1942 by Michael Esterhuiz. He was tending to his flock of sheep on a farm 60 kilometers west of the town of Keetmanshoop when he saw a massive snake hurl itself down a hill. Another sighting was in 1978, where a French farmer who was tending his cattle in the Karas region saw a bright white light, and then he noticed it was heading straight towards him. Afterwards, he heard a massive thud, and he heard one of his cattle moo in pain. As he rushed to check what attacked the cow, he saw the snake. He quoted to the local police, "I saw what looked like, as the best matching description I can give you is that it looked like a dragon. It had a bright white light on its head, which was blinding me. The color of it was brown and yellow. It had green eyes. There was a tar-like smell coming from it, and it had smoke coming out of its nostrils." On a related note, the two pictures on the far right of the screen are a flying creature called the Kongamato, which can be found deep in the bush of East Central Africa. This fascinating animal first received widespread attention when explorer Frank Whelan described it in his 1932 book, In Witchbound Africa. The Kongamato, which translates to overwhelmer of boats, is described as a large reddish creature with leathery wings devoid of feathers. Eyewitnesses, who are shown an illustration of the pterodactyl, unanimously agree to this identification of the Kongamato. A very credible account was described in 1956 by engineer J.P.F. Brown near Lake Bangweulu, Zambia, and reported in the April 2nd, 1957 Rhodesia Herald. Brown was driving back to Salisbury from a visit to Kansengna in Zaire. He stopped at a location called Fort Rosebery, just to the west of Lake Bangweulu, to get his canteen from the trunk. It was about 6 p.m. when he saw two creatures flying slowly and silently directly overhead. He observed that they looked prehistoric, with a long tail and narrow head. He estimated a wingspan of about 3 to 3.5 feet. One of them opened its mouth, in which he saw a large number of pointed teeth. In the middle of the screen and much closer to home, we find the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. In November 1966, two couples noticed a white-winged creature about 6 or 7 feet tall standing in front of the car that they were all sitting in. Eyewitnesses Roger Scarberry and Steve Mallett told the Point Pleasant Register that the beast had bright red eyes about 6 inches apart, a wingspan of 10 feet, and the apparent urge to avoid the bright headlights of the car. According to the witnesses, this creature was able to fly at incredible speeds as it chased their vehicle to the outskirts of town, but they all agreed that the beast was a clumsy runner on the ground as they saw it scuttle into a nearby field and disappear. More and more sightings were reported over the next year, but sightings have declined since the late 60s. Every so often, a sighting emerges, the last of which was reported in 2016. Still, the Mothman has inspired a book by John A. Keel and a movie adaptation starring Richard Gere, both available here at the Northampton Area Public Library. It's even inspired an annual Mothman Festival down in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the fall. Again, some terrestrial or land-dwelling cryptids conjure an immediate thought or image with just a name. When I say Bigfoot, what do you think of? Some may think of the word Sasquatch, another name for the same creature. Most likely think of an apish, bipedal, enormous, hairy humanoid. Let's take a closer look at Bigfoot and a few other famous terrestrial cryptids. The legends of Bigfoot go back beyond recorded history and cover the world. In North America, and particularly the Northwest, you can hear tales of 7-foot-tall hairy men stalking the woods, occasionally scaring campers, lumberjacks, hikers, and the like. Bigfoot is known by many titles within many different cultures, although the name Bigfoot is generally attributed to the mountainous western region of North America. The common name Sasquatch comes from the Salish Sasquatch. Other First Nations of the Pacific Northwest tell of a large creature much like a man, but imbued with special powers and characteristics. North American settlers started reporting sightings during the late 1800s and into the 1900s, with the occasional finding of footprints, sporadic encounters, and even a few grainy photos and videos adding to the mystery. But 64 years ago, this coming fall, Bigfoot first stepped into the public consciousness. Giant Footprints Puzzle Residence, a headline in the Humboldt Times announced. The small Northern California newspaper reported that a road construction crew had discovered human-like footprints that were a massive 16 inches long. The paper was the first to give the mysterious animal that made the prints its memorable moniker, Bigfoot. And the creature has been stomping through the American imagination ever since. In fact, the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization lists at least one report from every state, except Hawaii, over the past 2 decades. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, it may not make a sound, but it seems someone will report that a Bigfoot knocked it over. Those who claim to have seen Bigfoot have described everything from a large upright ape to an actual hairy human, sometimes standing over 8 feet tall and described as powerfully built. The debate and research continue. Entire organizations exist to study and document Bigfoot and prove its existence. And groups regularly search the Northwest woods looking for that ultimate proof. How is it that the evidence has not gotten any better despite the exponential increase in the quantity and quality of cameras? Asks Benjamin Radford, a research fellow with the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. Still, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence either. Wild animals don't exactly pose for photos, and the planet's ever-shrinking forests still regularly unpack surprises. Lauren Coleman, the founder of the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine, believes there is evidence for Bigfoot's existence, but he and his like-minded peers find it difficult to focus attention on this material amid the growing number of obvious shams on the internet. With or without hard evidence, many people clearly want to believe in Bigfoot. While Bigfoot is ancient, the Chupacabra only dates back to the 1990s. Despite its relatively young age, few cryptids are as storied and as fearsome as the dreaded Chupacabra. A blood-sucking creature allegedly the size of a small bear, sometimes with a tail, often covered in scaly skin, and with a row of spines down its back, the Chupacabra has been a staple in folklore throughout Mexico, Puerto Rico, Latin America, and the southwestern United States for decades. This monstrous creature attacks animals and consumes their blood. Its name is derived from the Spanish words chupar, meaning to suck, and cabra, Spanish for goat, and is quite literally translated as goat sucker. The name is derived from the first animals this bloodthirsty creature was reported to have killed in Puerto Rico in 1995. But the Chupacabra did not restrict its diet, expanding the feast to include chickens, sheep, rabbits, cats, and dogs. Hundreds of farm animals were ending up dead and bloodless, and people had no idea why. As soon as the word of the Puerto Rican farm animals broke, farmers in other countries began complaining of their own attacks. Animals in Mexico, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and the United States were all dying similarly gruesome deaths, seemingly with no explanation. Early reports described a creature that stood upright and resembled a large reptilian kangaroo with huge red or black eyes. No actual specimens were found or caught on camera, but other sightings were reported throughout the Americas and as far north as the United States. A different kind of Chupacabra was also reported in many of the same places. These creatures were smaller and stood upon 4 feet. They were generally canine in appearance but hairless. Actual specimens were produced, but they were identified by biologists as coyotes, dogs, or canine hybrids. The animals owed their strange appearance to hair loss resulting from sarcoptic mange, a highly contagious skin disease fairly common in dogs, which forces its sufferers to scratch away at mites burrowing under the skin. The skin ultimately loses its hair and becomes abnormally thick, and the itching produces nasty-looking scabs. It was suggested that the canines attacked livestock because the debilitating effects of the infestation put wild prey out of their reach. Like Bigfoot, there were 11 seasons of Finding Bigfoot on the Discovery Network. The Chupacabra has found its way into popular culture. Both descriptions of the creature served as monsters in low-budget motion pictures. The original description of the Chupacabra can be found in the 1995 sci-fi horror film Species, which featured a Canadian model as an alien-human hybrid. And the canine description can be found in the 2013 TV movie Chupacabra versus the Alamo. Known by several names in various indigenous cultures, Wendigo, Witigo, Witiko, and Wetigo, each roughly translates to the evil spirit that devours mankind. This creature may appear as a monster with some human characteristics, or as a spirit who has possessed a human being and made them monstrous. It is historically associated with cannibalism, murder, insatiable greed, and the cultural taboos against such behaviors. The Wendigo has long been known among the Algonquin, Ojibwe, Eastern Cree, Saulteaux, West Main Swampy Cree, Naskapi, and Innu peoples. They have described them as giants, many times larger than human beings, but descriptions vary somewhat. Despite that, all cultures describe the Wendigo as a malevolent, cannibalistic, supernatural being strongly associated with winter, famine, and starvation. Algonquian legend describes the creature as a giant with a heart of ice. Sometimes it is thought to be entirely made of ice. Its body is skeletal and deformed, with missing lips and toes. The Ojibwa describe it as a large creature, as tall as a tree, with a lipless mouth and jagged teeth. Its breath a strange hiss, its footprints full of blood. It eats any man, woman, or child who ventures into its territory. And those are the lucky ones. Sometimes the Wendigo chooses to possess a person instead, and then that luckless individual becomes a Wendigo, hunting down those they once loved and feasting upon their flesh. According to traditions, a Wendigo is created whenever a human resorts to cannibalism to survive. In the past, this occurred more often when indigenous people or settlers found themselves stranded in the bitter snow and ice of the North Woods. Sometimes, stranded for days, any survivors may have felt compelled to cannibalize the dead to survive. Other versions of the legend cite that humans who displayed extreme greed, gluttony, and excess might also be possessed by a Wendigo. Thus, the myth serves as a method of encouraging cooperation and moderation. Even today, Native American thinkers use Wendigo stories to present critical perspectives on various social problems, such as climate change and consumerism, and call for their resolution. Some versions of the Wendigo speak of a gigantic spirit over 15 feet tall that had once been human but had transformed into a creature by magic. Though all the descriptions of the creature vary slightly, the Wendigo is generally said to have glowing eyes, long yellowed fangs, terrible claws, and an overly long tongue. Sometimes they are described as having sallow, yellowish skin, and other times they are covered with matted hair. The beast is said to have several skills and powers, including stealth, near-perfect hunting capabilities, knowledge and use of every inch of its territory, and control of the weather through dark magic. They are portrayed as simultaneously gluttonous and emaciated from starvation. Wendigos are said to be cursed to wander the land, eternally seeking to fulfill their voracious appetite for human flesh. And if there is nothing left to eat, it starves to death. These legends lend their name to the disputed modern medical term Wendigo psychosis. Some psychiatrists consider it a syndrome that creates an intense craving for human flesh and a fear of becoming a cannibal. Ironically, this psychosis occurs within people living around the Great Lakes of Canada and the United States, where the Wendigo mythos is strongest. Wendigo psychosis usually develops in the winter in individuals who are isolated by heavy snow for long periods. The most common response when a person showed signs of Wendigo psychosis was a curing attempt by traditional native healers. In past cases, if these attempts failed and the possessed person began to threaten those around them or to act violently, they were executed. There have been reports dating back hundreds of years. A Wendigo allegedly made several appearances in Roseau in northern Minnesota from the late 1800s through the 1920s. Each time it was reported, an unexpected death followed. And finally, it was never seen again. Another well-known case involving Wendigo psychosis is that of Jack Fiddler, an Oji-Cree chief and medicine man known for his power of defeating Wendigos. Fiddler claimed to have defeated 14 Wendigos during his lifetime. In 1907, Fiddler and his brother Joseph were arrested by the Canadian authorities for murder. Jack committed suicide, but Joseph was tried and sentenced to life in prison. He ultimately was granted a pardon, but died 3 days later in jail before receiving the news. The frequency of Wendigo psychosis cases decreased sharply in the 20th century as the indigenous peoples came into greater and greater contact with Western ideologies. However, Wendigo creature sightings are still reported, especially in northern Ontario, near the cave of the Wendigo, around Kenora, where traders, trackers, and trappers have allegedly spotted it for decades. Many still believe that the Wendigo roams the woods and the prairies of northern Minnesota and Canada. Many have given Kenora, Ontario, Canada, the title of Wendigo capital of the world. Sightings of the beast in this area have continued well into the new millennium. Similar to Bigfoot, though relatively short in comparison, the Yeti resembles a large, hairy ape which lives in the remote mountain regions of Russia, China, and Nepal, particularly the Tibetan Himalayas near the snow line. A character in ancient legends and folklore of the Himalayan people, in most tales, the Yeti is a figure of danger. When Alexander the Great conquered the Indus Valley in 326 BC, he demanded to see a Yeti. But the local people told him that the creatures were unable to survive at that low an altitude. In modern times, when Westerners started traveling to the Himalayas, the myth became more sensational. In 1951, a British explorer named Eric Shipton, looking for an alternative route up Mount Everest, found a footprint that appeared to be hominoid. He took a picture, and the mystery of the Yeti, a Sherpa word for man-bear-snowman, cast a spell over the world. The photograph was taken on the Menlung Glacier west of Mount Everest on the Nepal-Tibet border. Shipton was one of the most highly respected Everest explorers, so the print he brought back had to be real. Nobody questioned him. What's captivating about the print is that it's really sharp. The snow was hard, so the photo looks like a cast. The second remarkable feature is that the print looks like a human footprint, but with a thumb, which gives it a primate-like feeling, but hominoid at the same time. Its enormous size, 13 inches, also suggests a magnificent hominoid, and the media grabbed it up. Most of the evidence for the Yeti comes from sightings and reports, however. There is a distinct lack of hard proof for the Yeti's existence, though a few pieces of evidence, such as the aforementioned photograph, have emerged through the years. Despite the lack of hard evidence over decades of searching, true believers aren't deterred. The fact that these mysterious creatures haven't been found is not taken as evidence that they don't exist, but instead proves how rare, reclusive, and elusive the abominable snowman is. Like Bigfoot, a single body would prove that the Yeti exists, though no amount of evidence can prove they don't exist. For that reason alone, these animals will always be with us. Now, where would an Oceans of Possibilities presentation on cryptids be without an in-depth look at the aquatic? Like terrestrial cryptids, aquatic cryptids are easily identified by where they spend the majority of their time, in the water. These animals may have any combination of a few distinct features, such as gills, scales, and fins, which are designed to help them survive in their chosen habitat. Perhaps two of the most famous aquatics are the Kraken and the Loch Ness Monster, but one particularly famous cryptid in writing is the Leviathan. Let's look a bit closer. Originating in Scandinavian folklore, the Kraken is usually depicted as an aggressive, cephalopod-like creature capable of destroying entire ships and dragging sailors to their doom. Many cultures around the world have a myth or legend about a tentacled beast bothering seafarers or generally getting up to no good. In ancient Greece, Aristotle and Pliny wrote about Thuthos, or squid. There's the Scylla in the Odyssey, and similar myths from the Caribbean, Lusca, Japan, Akoro Kamui, and New Zealand, Te Hueke a Muturangi. Squid and octopus are really unusual animals. Their body plan isn't similar to anything else we know of in the sea. They move quickly, and the way their bodies, arms, and tentacles move seem to stimulate something in our fear of the unknown. The fact that they are such odd creatures, with some very large species being very rarely seen, makes it very likely that they could be the starting point for the Kraken and other sea beast legends. What scientists and historians believe is that partially digested or rotted remains of giant squid and large octopus were washing up on beaches, and people were starting to guess what they might be. In Norway, the Kraken myth grew, and such washed-up specimens were interpreted as messages from God or the devil, sometimes called sea angels, sea devils, or sea monks. These things happened separately, and people around the world came up with similar answers and mythologies, a case of convergent evolution in myth form. You can find more recent references in the movies Clash of the Titans and Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, the later available here in the library. The Leviathan, on the other hand, is rather more famous than the written word. Think of Herman Melville's Moby Dick, available here in multiple forms. The tale references a giant sperm whale described as having a peculiar snow-white wrinkled forehead and a high pyramidical white hump. There's even reference to Leviathan in various scriptural accounts in the Bible. Old Testament references to a huge sea monster, Leviathan, are thought to come from a pre-biblical Mesopotamian myth in which the Ugaritic god Baal slays a multi-headed sea monster. Leviathan appears in the Psalms, chapter 74, verse 14, as a sea serpent that is killed by God and then given as food to the Hebrews in the wilderness. In Isaiah, chapter 7, verse 1, Leviathan is a serpent and a symbol of Israel's enemies who will be slain by God. In Job, chapter 41, it is a sea monster and a symbol of God's power of creation. While Leviathan may have been unfamiliar to a few of us, as it was to me, our next aquatic needs no introduction. The Loch Ness Monster. Affectionately called Nessie, this large marine creature allegedly lives in Loch Ness, a large freshwater lake near Inverness, Scotland. Although accounts of an aquatic beast living in the lake date back 1,500 years, all efforts to find any credible evidence of the animal have failed. Loch Ness, located in the Scottish Highlands, has the largest volume of fresh water in Great Britain. The body of water reaches a depth of nearly 800 feet and a length of about 23 miles, certainly large enough to house a mysterious creature. Scholars of the Loch Ness Monster find a dozen references to Nessie in Scottish history, dating back to around 500 AD, when local Picts carved a strange aquatic creature into standing stones near Loch Ness. In 1933, a new road was completed along Loch Ness's shore, affording drivers a clear view of the loch. On May 2nd, 1933, the Inverness Courier reported that a local couple claimed to have seen an enormous animal rolling and plunging on the surface. The story of the Loch Ness Monster became a media phenomenon, with London newspapers sending correspondents to Scotland and a circus offering a £20,000 reward for capture of the beast. After the 1933 sighting, interest steadily grew, and scores of tourists descended on Loch Ness waiting for an appearance of the beast. A famous 1934 photograph seemed to show a dinosaur-like creature with a long neck emerging out of the murky waters, lending some to speculate that Nessie was a solitary survivor of the long-extinct plesiosaurs. The aquatic plesiosaurs were thought to have died off with the rest of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. Loch Ness was frozen solid during recent ice ages, however, so this creature would have had to have made its way up the River Ness from the sea in the past 10,000 years. And the plesiosaurs, believed to be cold-blooded, would not long survive in the frigid waters of Loch Ness. More likely, others suggested, it was an archaeocete, a primitive whale with a serpentine neck that is thought to have been extinct for 18 million years. Amateur investigators keep an almost constant vigil, and in 1960, several British universities launched expeditions to Loch Ness using sonar to search the deep. Nothing conclusive was found, but in each expedition, the sonar operators detected large, moving underwater objects they could not explain. In 1975, Boston's Academy of Applied Science combined sonar and underwater photography in an expedition to Loch Ness. A photo resulted that, after enhancement, appeared to show the giant flipper of a plesiosaur-like creature. Further sonar expeditions in the 1980s and 1990s resulted in more tantalizing, if inconclusive, readings. Revelations in 1994 that the famous 1934 photo was a hoax have hardly dampened the enthusiasm of tourists and professional and amateur investigators to the legend of the Loch Ness Monster. As fascinating as those three are, Pennsylvania has its own set of aquatic cryptids, many of which seem to take after Nessie. Let's start with the Raystown Ray, which are the pictures on the far left of your screen. In 2010, a team from Sci-Fi Channel's Fact or Faked Paranormal Files visited Raystown Lake, an 8,300-acre man-made lake in Huntington County, to search for the Raystown Ray, previously photographed by a tourist in 2007. They dove into the lake at night, taking sonar readings and photographs, and even towed a dead carp around the lake as bait. Their conclusions were that witnesses seemed credible, but the case was still unexplained. According to the Huntington County Visitors Bureau, whose biggest tourist draw is the lake, the Raystown Ray was first reported in 1962 in the old Raystown Dam. That dam, built in 1905, was destroyed in 1971 to make way for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' creation of today's Raystown Lake, with depths as great as 185 feet. Organizers of an annual Raystown Ski Club water show almost canceled the show when the creature was seen lurking near the jump ramps that would be used by the skiers. However, by showtime, it seemed to have moved elsewhere in the lake. Subsequent sightings of the Raystown Ray have been sparse. Only a handful of sightings have been reported since 2008. The shared description of the ray seems to be a large serpent-like creature or an even larger creature, maybe 50 to 60 feet long, with a body that remains submerged and a serpent-like neck topped by a reptilian head that occasionally appears above the water. This later description echoes that of Nessie, a plesiosaur-type creature. From Raystown Lake, we move to the right and to the Monongahela River, a 130-mile-long river that runs between both West Virginia and Pennsylvania. This river has long had legends of strange aquatic beasts associated with it. Much like any large body of water within North America, the Monongahela is said to have a resident monster dwelling beneath its surface. Its name is the Ogwa. While native tribes in the area have long known about the large aquatic beast living within the river, European settlers to Pennsylvania and West Virginia had to learn about it from stories and legends. The indigenous peoples would warn settlers not to venture too close to the water's edge, as the large, powerful jaws of the ogwa were more than capable of plucking a victim off the shore and dragging them back down beneath the surface of the water. The beast was often thought to drown its victims first and store the bodies in its den, only to devour them later, when the time was right. Even though the ogwa is typically described in the same way as most other river monsters, often seen as a dark shape below the water, churns the surface, knocks over canoes, pulls down animals floating on the surface, etc., it does differ from its other monstrous aquatic cousins in one unique way. It is also able to survive on land. This aggressive creature was described as not having flippers or fins, but 4 stubby little legs instead. As previously mentioned, the ogwa was said to be able to strike fast at potential prey on the shore. But if for some reason it missed, it would quickly dart out of the water, chasing its desired dinner until caught. Then the beast would either carry or drag its victim back into the river. Its long, thick tail would drag on the ground the entire way back to the water, oftentimes creating deep slide marks in the loose earth. Stories of the ogwa describe it as being reddish-brown in color, almost turtle-like in appearance, nearly 20 feet long and roughly 500 pounds. Many researchers believe that legends of the ogwa could have started after local tribes came across a possible rogue alligator that made its way up the Mississippi into the Ohio River and eventually into the Monongahela. Other researchers, though, believe that a larger than normal alligator snapping turtle is to blame for the stories and legends. While normally found down south, alligator snapping turtles can be found as far north as Maine and survive just as well. So far, it's all just speculation. Moving right once more and towards the center of the Pennsylvania wilds at the northern end of Clinton County and Kettle Creek State Park, we come across another legend over a century old, a weird, barely seen monster living in the Susquehanna River known as the Kettle Creek Monster, the West Branch Dugong, or the Susquehanna Seal. Most of the information about this cryptid comes from an article in the Daily Democrat from February 27, 1897. The article described the travels of a creature that existed back in the days before the valley was settled in the 1700s. It was said to have swum into the Susquehanna River during a time of high waters, possibly an unrecorded flood. Finding prey plentiful, it continued to swim upstream until it got stuck along the Susquehanna, now limited to the area between present-day Loch Haven and Kettle Creek. Not containing a clear physical description, the article describes the Susquehanna seal as a marine animal or sea monster, big with the bulk of an ox or hippopotamus. Mostly, the creature just stayed underwater, unseen. The animal was definitely audible, however, making noise at night. People have reported hearing it howl and thrash in the dark. The Democrat said, "Those who have crossed the animal's path heard its terrible roar, his disturbing the waters and lashing them into a foam." Susquehanna seal sightings dropped off in the later part of the 1800s. According to the article, this caused a difference in opinion among the locals. Some assumed this meant the animal had died, or perhaps escaped back to the ocean during the 1889 flood. Others insisted that it was just lying low for a while, still swimming the waters of Clinton County. Some have speculated on the species of this creature. A cuttlefish or sea lion, perhaps some sort of shark or whale. There are those who speculated that it was a dinosaur left over from prehistoric times. A labyrinthodon, ichthyosaurus, or hadrosaurus. Perhaps even a plesiosaurus, like our good friend Nessie. Speaking of plesiosaurs like Nessie, on the far right, There have been reported sightings of a similar cryptid in Lake Erie. The Lake Erie monster, known by locals of Ohio, Michigan, and Pennsylvania as Bessie, or South Bay Bessie, has been sighted by numerous people in Lake Erie since 1793. Legends describing a water serpent living in the Great Lakes go back even further. Most reports describe this monster as a gray-skinned, snake-like creature measuring between 30 and 40 feet in length, with a body estimated to be a foot in diameter. Other observers have described Bessie as being more similar to a plesiosaurus. Some locals speculate that there are two different cryptids lurking in the shallow depths of Lake Erie, while others believe that these sightings are all the same monster. The first modern report of Bessie dates to the 18th century. In 1793, the crew of the sloop Felicity claimed to have seen the creature in Lake Erie just north of Sandusky, Ohio. The captain of the vessel stated that they accidentally disturbed the monster while shooting at ducks. There were also several sightings of the creature throughout the 19th century. In 1817 alone, there were at least 3 sightings of Bessie reported by locals. One report described Bessie as a large, dark-colored, spotted serpent measuring almost 40 feet in length. Another described the animal as copper-colored and about 60 feet in length. The final report that year described a 30-foot-long creature similar to a sturgeon, but with arms that had been beached for a time, leaving behind thrash marks on the shore and a few silver scales the size of silver dollars. After disappearing from the news records for several decades, Bessie was seen again in 1892. The entire crew of a ship reported encountering a huge sea serpent on their voyage from Buffalo, New York to Toledo, Ohio. The captain saw a large area of water about half a mile ahead of the boat churn up and begin foaming. As the ship approached the area, they saw a huge creature wrestling about in the waters as if fighting with an unseen foe. The creature later relaxed its body and stretched out to its full length, which the crew estimated to be about 50 feet long and 4 feet in circumference. Its head stuck up above the water, another 4 feet. The monster appeared brownish in color, and its eyes were described as being viciously sparkling. The creature was reported to have had very large fins. Bessie seems to have gone into hiding for the first part of the 20th century, with only a handful of unverified reports and sightings. Then, on September 4th, 1990, Bessie apparently resurfaced the depths of the lake. A local man named Harold Bricker and his family claimed to have seen the creature while on a fishing trip. The family claimed that a large creature swam through the water about 1,000 feet from their boat. It swam alongside the boat, keeping pace. This Bessie was apparently about 35 feet long, black, and had a snake-like head. When the news broke, reports of more sightings rolled in. Following these sightings, John Schaffner, editor of a weekly newspaper in Port Clinton, Ohio, ran a contest to name the creature. The name Bessie was chosen after the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant in Port Clinton, which is located near where Bessie was first sighted. The name Bessie rhymes with Nessie, making it the obvious choice. In addition to numerous sightings of this strange creature, there have also been several maritime attacks in recent decades that have been attributed to Bessie. 3 people were left dead following an incident on the lake in 1992. One survivor of the group claimed that they had been attacked by a creature with a head the size of a car. About a decade after this alleged incident, an article published by the Ottawa Citizen on August 13, 2001, reported that a creature had been attacking swimmers near the Port Dover pump house. Examinations of the swimmers' bites were ruled out as being from round gobies, lamprey eels, snapping turtles, walleye, piranhas, or muskellunge-type fishes. It is possible, however, that the bites could have been from primitive-type fish known as a bowfin. Or maybe they were love bites from the Lake Erie monster. Though modern accounts of Bessie sightings began in the late 18th century, there have been local legends of similar creatures inhabiting the waters of Lake Erie for centuries. The Seneca tribe tells of the story of the good spirit and the evil spirit, in which the evil spirit commands a huge water serpent who swims through the waters of the Niagara River and Lake Erie. Iroquois legends also describe a similar creature called Oniare. Oniare is a dragon-like horned water serpent who lives in the Great Lakes, is said to have poisonous breath, and, according to legends, capsizes canoes and eats travelers. To protect oneself from Oniare, people must provide offerings and invoke Oniare's mortal enemy, the thunder god Hinon. Could these water serpents from indigenous legends be the same creature that still lurks below the surface of Lake Erie? Now, those educated in the world of cryptids may assume that Bigfoot may be Pennsylvania's designated mythical mascot, but there's actually another creature that takes the crown. Before we get to it, let's take a look at the runners-up in no particular order. I've only numbered them here in order to make them easier to discuss. We've already discussed Bigfoot at number 6 and the Raystown Ray at number 4 in depth, so we'll begin with the more mundane. Reports of extremely large snakes have been coming into police stations all across Pennsylvania for many years, with the most recent of those being in 2003 in Adams County. The snakes in question have been said to be anywhere from 15 to 40 feet in length and capable of swallowing chickens whole with little effort. While some local scientists have theorized the snakes could simply be a foreign species introduced into the local ecosystem, allowing them to grow to incredible size, the most continue to deny their existence altogether. Mountain lions, or more accurately, the eastern cougar, have been rumored to be in Pennsylvania for many years despite the denial by officials. While sightings of the large cat have been reported hundreds of times, the current record reflects the belief that if eastern cougars were present in Pennsylvania, evidence such as a body would have been discovered by now. One of the most dangerous aspects of these reports is that mountain lions have been known to attack humans in the past. The fact that they are known to exist, unlike some of the other creatures in this list, increases the odds of these attacks actually taking place. From the plausible, we move on to the legendary. The thunderbird is an enormous bird that comes straight from indigenous peoples' folklore. The massive flying creature is said to have a wingspan of larger than 20 feet, which it uses to create loud, thunderous sounds in an attempt to scare away humans and other potential threats. Because of their large size, legends also tell how thunderbirds are prone to swoop down and carry off unsuspecting children to become a meal. Some tribes even claim that thunderbird's meal of choice is killer whales. Next comes the terrifying. The Waterford sheepman is a creature truly capable of terrorizing your nightmares for a decent amount of time. Multiple witnesses have said that this hybrid monster has been creeping around the small town of Waterford, Pennsylvania since the 1970s. With the body of a man and the head of a sheep, the Waterford sheepman is rumored to stalk its unwitting prey until the opportunity arises for it to feast on its blood. Some people believe the sheepman is the same species of cryptid as the goatman, which would increase the number of sightings to the hundreds. Before we can pull a top 3, we have to mention a classic creature. Werewolves are one of the most well-known cryptids in existence. A man that can turn into a wolf on the night of the full moon is something that has been used in countless horror movies. But the truth is, the movies aren't far off. Unlike their more passive cousins, the dogmen, we're getting there. Werewolves have also been described as being extremely vicious with a thirst for nothing but blood. Another difference werewolves have from dogmen is their ability to turn back into a normal human once the full moon passes, making them extremely difficult to locate. Reports of werewolves being spotted in Pennsylvania can be seen as recent as 2014. Rather than going directly to the dogman, I'd rather take a little stop at the adorable Albatwitch. Aside from its more popular cousin Bigfoot, areas of Pennsylvania are also known to be inhabited by these smaller ape-like creatures. This bipedal cryptid is said to only be about 4 feet tall and lives among the trees along the banks of the Susquehanna River. Legends of small ape-like animals have been around long before written record, and the area they are said to inhabit has been the home of countless mysterious sights and sounds for nearly 75 years. Albatwitches are said to prefer the taste of apples and will often wait for the perfect opportunity to steal them. In Lancaster County in the coming fall, you can join in the festivities of the Albatwitch Festival around September 8th on Albatwitch Day. Similar to a werewolf, the Pennsylvania dogman is an elusive cryptid that cannot be captured but has been sighted as recently as 2010. While no one can say where they come from or how long they have existed, the first documented encounter of dogmen happened all the way back in 1887 by a pair of lumberjacks. Few stories of the dogman have described him acting hostile, but residents of the Commonwealth still fear it due to its large size and scary appearance. Aside from Pennsylvania, dogman-like creatures have been described all around the world, lending some credibility to these stories. Finally, according to the American Bestiary, those in the Keystone State should be keeping their eyes peeled in Pennsylvania forests for the squonk. Unlike any other creature spoken of today, this cryptid is not the least bit threatening. If anything, the squonk would be described as pitiful. A small pig-like animal with piles of ill-fitting excess skin almost always covered in warts. Squonks remain in a constant state of grief, ashamed of their appearance. Because of this, it has been said that hunters were able to track squonks down by following a trail of tears they would leave behind. However, the animal would dissipate into a pool of tears once captured. An anecdotal story of J.P. Wentling states that he was able to catch a squonk in a sack, only to realize that the miserable creature had melted into tears as he carried it home. While squonks may not be as scary as other cryptids discussed today, they are definitely one of the most original. As seen in my reference list, there is a lot of information out there on these creatures. Some of it reputable, some of it not. We even have some great material in the library to get you started if you don't feel like scrolling through the entire internet. Clearly, I felt like scrolling through the entire internet. So, what's your favorite cryptid from this presentation? Do you have any that weren't mentioned? Let's talk about it in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you soon at the Northampton Area Public Library.